I'm Reed. Just a normal 27-year-old guy talking about building wealth and getting your life together in your 20s. All right, let's get real. You're probably tired of hearing about AI, but trust me, this one is different. This isn't just another tech trend. This is a financial circus, and we're all invited whether we like it or not. Seriously, stop blindly following the hype. Most people will never get rich just working a regular job. It is not about how hard you work. It is about understanding how the game is played, and right now, the game is getting wild. So, imagine this. It is a Friday night. You're scrolling through your phone, and bam, another AI company is going public. But this isn't just any company. It is Elon Musk's SpaceX. And its prospectus, man, it reads like a science fiction novel. I'm talking pictures of rockets and Mars before you even get to the table of contents. It is like they're trying to pump something, right? SpaceX, trading under the ticker SPCX, just shattered every record in the book, making Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire, which sounds awesome until you dig a little deeper now. Depending on who you ask, this is either the start of the AI golden age for us regular folks, or the beginning of the end of this massive AI bubble. And let me tell you, this is just the first of 3 massive AI-focused IPOs we're expecting this year. Anthropic, the brains behind Claude, quietly filed earlier this year, probably looking to go public sometime this fall. And then there is OpenAI, the ChatGPT creators, who just announced this week that they've also filed their S-1 with the SEC. These IPOs are breaking records left and right. For SpaceX, it is not just the insane market capitalization. They also set aside a record percentage of shares to give us, the retail investors, a piece of the action. And get this, Anthropic and OpenAI were both valued at almost $1 trillion each in private rounds. These 3 companies together are expected to raise more money by going public than all other US IPOs combined since at least 2022. And 2026 is looking like it is going to blow every previous year out of the water. All of that sounds super impressive, right? But here's the kicker. These companies are relatively small, and most of them aren't even profitable. Of the 3, Anthropic is the only one on track to actually make money this year. SpaceX is actually losing money at the operating level. They're spending way more than they're making. OpenAI, for example, is planning to spend $600 billion by 2030 on compute, compared to its current $25 billion in annualized revenue. So, you can see why they're rushing to go public. They need a truckload of cash, and the public markets are like a giant ATM. But here's where it gets a little sketchy. They're specifically targeting retail investors like you and me with these IPOs. And some folks are worried that these companies are going to burn through our pensions and life savings to fuel their AI money furnaces long before they even have a viable business strategy. SpaceX, in particular, is turning heads with its bizarre prospectus. It could go down in history as one of the weirdest ever. The company is advertising itself as a bet on Mars colonization, enterprise AI, asteroid mining, and even data centers in space, and their mission statement to build the systems and technologies necessary to make life multiplanetary. To understand the true nature of the universe, and to extend the light of consciousness to the stars. I don't know what extending the light of consciousness to the stars means, but I'm guessing it involves that Joe Rogan episode. Regardless, there is a lot of talk about an AI bubble, and it seems like they're just pulling us deeper into it. That is why I wanted to talk about these IPOs, the details we have, the broader market implications, and what you should consider if you're hoping to ride one of these rockets to the moon, literally or figuratively, because space tourism is another one of SpaceX's hypothetical business lines. The first half of this video is going to focus heavily on SpaceX. Since we have the most details about it now that it is public, I'll put chapters in the description below. If you want to skip around, as you probably know, SpaceX was started and is mostly controlled by Elon Musk, and as the name suggests, it is heavily involved in the space industry. They've actually built a pretty good reputation for themselves. They're famous for their rockets, pioneering techniques for reusing rocket boosters, and they have a dominant position in the space launch industry, representing 80% of global mass to orbit since 2023, and their connectivity business, Starlink, which offers internet via satellite, is actually a fast-growing profit-making business. However, earlier this year, caught up in the AI hype, SpaceX decided to jump into the AI game. Elon Musk basically used SpaceX to acquire his other company, xAI, which owns the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, and the AI formerly known as Mecha Hitler. The AI segment makes up about 17% of the company's total revenues, but it is gobbling up the majority of their capital expenditures, dominating the rest of the business's spending. That is why SpaceX is part of this broader AI gold rush discussion. With this IPO, SpaceX is only selling about 4.2% of its company's stock, roughly 555.6 million shares. Most of the company will still be held by the private investors who owned it before the IPO. Elon Musk himself will retain 42% of the company's equity before dilution. And at an IPO price of $135 per share, the company is set to raise at least $75 billion from this sale. This makes SpaceX the largest IPO capital raise on record. They're expected to exceed their original market cap objective of around $1.75 trillion, which will actually make it displace Elon's other business, Tesla, as the 8th largest U.S. company by market cap, which is remarkable considering the company's revenue doesn't even crack the top 200 list. And this brings us to the first reason why many are calling this IPO absurd. SpaceX essentially hit the market with a price-to-sales ratio of over 90 times. This puts it way above most other publicly traded tech companies, Google and Meta, for example, who both have AI businesses and are actually profitable, trade at price-to-sales ratios of around 10 times. And while these rich valuations are usually justified by higher growth rates, historically speaking anyway, that is not what we're seeing here. SpaceX's AI segment isn't even its fastest-growing segment internally. The business grew just 12.5% year-over-year in the latest quarter, and the company's revenue as a whole increased just 15.4%, well below the revenue growth rates seen by its competitors. However, most of SpaceX's valuation is clearly tied to its future potential, not its current standing. In fact, Morningstar analysts have argued that based on current performance, SpaceX is worth less than half of what it is IPOing for. So, it is really what Elon Musk has planned for the business that has investors excited. But that brings us to another absurd aspect of this IPO. The company's prospectus, where it lays out its future roadmap. When companies IPO in the US, they submit an S-1 form to the SEC for review, a document that contains all the necessary disclosures and information so that investors can make an informed decision. And in typical Elon Musk fashion, the SpaceX prospectus is pretty unconventional. Right off the bat, investors have to scroll through 11 pages of pictures of rocket ships and other space tech before they even get to the table of contents, which I guess is fitting since people often throw in random rocket ships when they're trying to pump something. Soon after, we're hit with a quote from Elon Musk philosophizing about being a spacefaring civilization. And of course, the company's Star Trek mission statement, in addition to these grandiose statements throughout the document. The prospectus also includes a number of moonshot business ideas, literally, because most of them involve operations in space for some reason, including traveling around Earth via spaceship, space tourism, in-orbit manufacturing, traveling to Mars and setting up businesses there, building in-orbit data centers, and developing human augmentation systems. A good chunk of this, by the prospectus's own admission, is science fiction, since the technology for many of these things is either unproven or non-existent. With all of SpaceX's focus on space, you'd be forgiven for forgetting that SpaceX is an AI business. But to convince the non-believers, the prospectus includes an outline of the business's total addressable market, essentially what it sees as its future revenue potential, with 93% of this amount coming entirely from its artificial intelligence opportunities, mainly enterprise applications. Now, for those of us who thought we were talking about a rocket company, these figures might be a bit of a surprise. For one, the total addressable market is about the size of the entire US economy, and regarding enterprise applications, most people see Grok as just an extension of the X social media platform. In fact, internally, the company even combines many of its operating figures for both the X social media platform and Grok, seemingly showing that its primary use is for social media. And I don't know many enterprises that are keen on integrating an AI model known for undressing people on X into their workflows. The one business case the company did put forward in its marketing material of Grok being used for an enterprise effectively amounted to being a glorified Google Translate, which doesn't exactly demonstrate this massive potential. And the idea of Grok being a contender with Anthropic and OpenAI for these enterprise applications hasn't really been helped by recent announcements from the company that it would be renting out compute power to Anthropic for $1.25 billion a month and to Google for $920 million a month. While these deals could be lucrative, given that they alone would actually double SpaceX's revenue from 2020. 5. It is a bit confusing for a company claiming Grok will dominate the space when it is renting out its capacity to other AI models that are more known for those enterprise applications. So you can see why the SpaceX IPO has raised so many eyebrows beyond just the sheer scale of it. The way the company is being marketed is completely different from the company investors are actually buying into here, and that is without even getting into the other quirks, like Elon retaining 85% of the voting rights over SpaceX, thanks to a special share class with 10 times the voting rights of Class A shares. And a good chunk of the IPO proceeds are simply going towards paying off existing obligations, despite the company marketing that it will go towards developing its business. There is also the story that Musk actually required companies working on his IPO to subscribe to Grok. And as mentioned, the company is heavily focused on attracting retail investment, with SpaceX reserving up to 30% of its shares for individual investors compared to the typical 5 to 10%. They even launched a retail-focused website, spacexpo.com, where they provided investor access to the company's prospectus, roadshow presentation, which is usually only for institutional investors, and a fact sheet, and listed all the brokerages where individual investors could go and access IPO shares.